Good afternoon. Happy Wednesday. Good to see everyone's face. I'm going to give you just a second to get connected. I still see people connecting. It's good to see everyone today. We have a really interesting topic that I'm excited to bring to you today. So before we get started, I want to have you hover down to the bottom of your screen and enable your chat box. So if you see at the bottom in your little taskbar, the little box that says chat, click that. And then I want you to, first of all, give me a shout out and tell me where you're joining from. We have quite a few people already on and people joining. Where are you joining us from? I'm in Orlando, Florida. I'm Anissa Mitchell with Parkinson and Movement Disorder Alliance. If you guys know, PMD Alliance is an all remote office. Basically, we're all coming from different areas. So I'm in Florida, and Amy, who's with me today from PMD Alliance, she's from California. So let's get a shout out and see where everyone's coming from. I love seeing people from different places. We've got Canada. Wow, we've got Florida, Kansas City, Missouri. It's fantastic to have everyone with us today. So I am excited to invite you to meet our speakers today. We have Sidney Collin, who is going to be talking to you about her invention, actually, the NexStride. She is the co-founder and CEO of Auditory Devices, and she's going to be talking about what her device is and how this helps the issue of freezing of gait. So if you have experienced that sticking to the floor sensation when you're trying to walk, we're going to be talking about this. We also have Maria Allen, who is a physical therapist, and she is an expert with people who have all types of neurodegenerative diseases and is LSVT Big certified and started really focusing on Parkinson's, as I understand it, back in that time when she was certified in 2011. And instead of me trying to explain how they got to where they are today and how they partnered and are working on freezing and this device, I'm going to hand this over to them, first of all, and welcome them for joining us today, and then let them tell you their expertise and where they come from. So ladies, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here and to share some information about freezing of gait, what we can do about it, and the NexStride as a possible solution. So as Anissa said, my name is Sidney Collin. I am the CEO and the co-founder of Auditory Devices. I actually have a background in biomedical engineering and in computational neuroscience, and went from the research background looking at the research to see that there are so many devices that can be brought from research to devices that are actually brought to the market so that people can start using them and benefiting from that research. So I'll talk a little bit more about NexStride's story, but I also want Maria to be able to introduce herself because we're really, really lucky to have her here.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maria Allen. I'm a physical therapist, and I've been a physical therapist for 38 years. So I have a lot of experience working with all different kinds of problems that people face. But the last almost 10 years, I've been working almost exclusively with people with Parkinson's disease. And I got started because I found out that people with Parkinson's have a lot of potential. They can get better and they can stay better, and exercise and therapy is really important and really beneficial. And that's what I really love to do, is help people get better and stay better and live better lives. So that's what I've been doing. I started to get, as Anissa said, with LSVT Big, and then I took another therapy course called POWER, Parkinson's Wellness Recovery, and became a certified Power Moves therapist and instructor. And so now I work with people that are more homebound. I work in a home health company. So I've kind of worked the whole gamut of helping people with Parkinson's disease throughout the stages. And I met Sidney when they were working on this device and became an advisor to kind of help them from a clinical perspective and use her smart engineering brain and come up with a device that's really helpful and beneficial for people with Parkinson's.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll jump into the presentation. Just so everybody knows, we will leave time for questions at the end. So if you have any questions, make sure you write them down, put them in the chat, and we can answer them at the end. Okay, just want to make sure you all can see my screen. Yes, I'm seeing nods, so we will go ahead. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce the NexStride, what it is that we do, the invention that Maria was discussing, high level, and then I'll pass it off to Maria and she'll kind of deep dive into freezing of gait, what it is, how you can help with freezing of gait, what are some of the options, and then we'll end going back into the NexStride in a little bit more detail once you understand more about what freezing of gait is. So high level, let's start from the beginning. So as I said, I studied biomedical engineering at a local university, actually in San Luis Obispo, Cal Poly. While I was a student there, I met a local veteran named Jack. So here's a picture of me and Jack together. Jack came to Cal Poly because he lived with Parkinson's disease and suffered from freezing of gait. It was the worst symptom that he experienced, and he had no effective solution to it. So he came to the biomedical engineering department at Cal Poly, really asking for help. He was already familiar with the visual and auditory cues because he was using them in his physical therapy office, but he needed something to be able to take at home and to be able to use at home, whether that's, you know, walking around his house, walking around the block with his wife, or going to get a cup of coffee. So that's how I met Jack. So Jack, as I said, the worst symptom that he experienced with Parkinson's was freezing of gait. So here's a video of Jack experiencing freezing of gait. He's trying to walk across his living room floor. So you can see his legs are trembling. He's trying to pick up his foot, but no matter how hard he tries to pick up his foot, he just can't pick it up. So that's what freezing of gait looks like. Maria will go into the medical definition of freezing of gait, but Jack really describes it as feeling like his feet are glued to the floor or stuck in a box of cement. And the reason that that happens is that there is a lack of connection between the brain and the body. And it makes it so that when he's sending that signal to initiate movement, that signal just doesn't get to the motor neurons that are activating his muscles. As you can tell, you know, this symptom can be really frustrating. It's also a leading cause of falls for people with Parkinson's disease. So it's really, really important for us to address this. So as we started to look into the research behind these visual and auditory cues, what we found is that there's actually a large amount of data behind these visual and auditory cues and being effective to help overcome freezing of gait. What they're doing essentially is reestablishing that connection between the brain and the body and allowing someone to initiate movement in a different way. So these visual and auditory cues that we've integrated into the NexStride have been shown in research to decrease the duration of freezing episodes by 69%, reduce the frequency of episodes from coming on by 43%, and one study even showed that it reduced falls by 40%. So these are significant numbers. The visual and auditory cues have been used in physical therapy offices for years, but what was missing was something to take home with you, to use with you every day. Again, whether that's walking around the house, walking to the beach, going to get a cup of coffee. So essentially what we did was take the most effective visual and auditory cues from research, combine them into a simple portable device that can attach onto any cane, walker, or walking pole. So the visual cue that we use here is a green laser line that's projected onto the floor in front of you. You visualize yourself stepping over that green laser line, and that change of intention changes the neural pathways that are being activated in your brain and allows you to overcome freezing of gait. The auditory cue that we use is a metronome. So you try and step to the beat of the metronome. And again, that change of intention allows you to initiate that movement in a different way and be able to overcome freezing of gait episodes. So I'll go into detail a little bit more after Maria talks, but I'll hand it over to Maria and she can talk a little bit more about what's actually happening with freezing of gait and what it is. Oh, sorry, I forgot. I actually have a video of Jack. This is the first time that he used the first device that we ever made for him. So you can see the difference there of him freezing, not being able to move his legs, and then with that green laser line, being able to walk across his living room floor. So it really, really made a big difference for Jack. And Jack is actually the one, I made this device for him. I had no intention of starting a company or bringing this device to market, but Jack's the one that brought me to local support groups and helped me understand that there are a lot more people that needed a device like this. And that's where I met Maria, who's the Parkinson's expert and are one of our close advisors who really helped us develop this product and understand the need that many, many more people with Parkinson's have, that we can have a bigger impact than just a device for Jack. All right, off to you, Maria.
All right. So freezing of gait, as Sidney said, is a temporary involuntary inability to move. And I get to control the screen now. Let's see if it'll work here. No? Okay, great. So it's a very common symptom in Parkinson's disease, and it's a very disabling symptom. So in symptoms of Parkinson's disease, there's stiffness, there's tremor, there's postural instability, there's that stoop posture. There's a lot of different symptoms, but freezing of gait is a very disabling component. And it's usually a brief but sudden episode of inability to take that next step, forward stepping. And the times that it happens the most are getting started walking, initiation of walking, turning in narrow spaces, under stressful conditions, and with dual tasking, which is basically being able to do more than one thing at a time. So walking and turning, walking and thinking about sitting down, walking and carrying something, walking and carrying on a conversation, any of those kinds of tasks that you have to walk and change directions are all dual tasking events. So when we think about, let's see if I can go next. Why is it so debilitating? Part of it is it's very unpredictable. Some people know when they freeze, they have certain situations they freeze certain times, but it can also come on fairly unpredictable. It's a major risk factor for falls and hospitalizations. So talking about falls a little bit, people with Parkinson's are at a higher risk of falls. And even initially within a year of diagnosis, 25% of people with Parkinson's are having falls. And between 45 to 68% in the latest research I could find, that many people with Parkinson's are falling every year. And about 50% or more of them are falling multiple times a year. And we know that falls, especially in the older population, are very serious in that they can cause fractures and head injuries and all kinds of issues that lead to hospitalizations and major problems and even lead to death. So reducing falls is a really important thing from the very beginning, not just at the end of towards when you get older. It's a problem for everyone. And it's also a major source of disability or people not being able to get out and enjoy their life. So it affects your independence and your quality of life. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit more as we go along. So thinking about those falls, and we said trying to keep people, oops, not that one, there we go, safe is really, really important. And people describe freezing of gait in different ways. So you saw Jack, he had, we can describe it on what happens. And Jack had that kind of alternating trembling leg movements where he just was trying and couldn't get those legs to go. Some freezing starts with the steps just getting smaller and smaller and smaller and shuffling more and just can't get that step ahead. And then some people have that true akinesia, which is no movement. They just can't move. They're just stuck. There's no movement of their legs and they can't take that next step forward. You can also talk about freezing of gait based on some of the underlying symptoms or triggers. And so one of the symptoms or triggers freezing of gait can be the postural problems. So if you have a typical little bit forward head, maybe a little flexed posture, that kind of stoop posture that tends to be common in Parkinson's, that gets your weight out over your toes and it's harder to take that next step forward. Anxiety, and anxiety is a symptom in Parkinson's disease. It's one of those non-motor symptoms, and there are a lot of non-motor symptoms that are actually usually more problematic for quality of life than some of the motor symptoms. So anxiety is one of those where, you know, maybe 60 to 80% of people with Parkinson's have some form of anxiety. And that anxiety, when you're anxious, your brain just cannot process things very well, and it creates more problems with freezing of gait and things that cognitive problems, attentional impairments. So there's a little bit of executive dysfunction or problems in how your brain processes all that information. And so those are problems. And another trigger or timing of freezing of gait can be off time freezing of gait. So most people with Parkinson's do take medication. A lot of people take a dopamine, you know, the primary gold standard is a dopamine replacement, like carbidopa, levodopa, or Sinemet, or Rytari, or some form of that. But it's a short-acting drug that has a on period and then an off period. And freezing of gait is more common in those off times when your medication is not working as well, or you don't have as much of that dopamine in your system. So we're going to talk a little bit about what causes freezing. And what's challenging is we don't really know. And it's probably a lot of you out there have Parkinson's or know or caregivers, care partners for people with Parkinson's. Everybody with Parkinson's has a different course. There's no typical person with Parkinson's. There are some phenotypes. There's some people that are either really stiff and rigid and have gait problems, or maybe people that have a lot of tremor, but everybody is kind of an individual and has a different set of symptoms and a different set of non-motor symptoms and a little bit different course. So it's really unclear, and they're doing a lot of research, but they don't really have a cause. As we think about Parkinson's disease, why we want to talk about the basal ganglia system is because that's where the cueing is going to come in, and why we use those cues. So Parkinson's disease is a progressive neurodegenerative disease, and it involves the basal ganglia. So those are deep in your brain, and what happens in there, in the substantia nigra, the basal ganglia there's dopamine being produced in there. And dopamine is it's like a neurotransmitter. It helps regulate the body's movement. So when you have normal amounts of dopamine, then your movement is just easy and habitual, and you don't have to think to initiate, and things work really well. Over time, with Parkinson's disease, the neurons that produce the dopamine die. There's a process, something going on in that brain where those cells get sick and die. And as they die, you have more motor symptoms showing up. So usually by the time someone gets a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, 50 to 60% of those dopamine producing neurons have already died. And the process of these dopamine producing neurons dying happens slowly over time. Usually it's been going on for quite a while before you actually get a diagnosis. So that chemical also, besides just movement, there are basically 3 different pathways, and part of it is all of those movement things, but it also helps with coordination. It helps with rewards, so feeling good about things. Dopamine is kind of a feel-good chemical, and if you do something you really love doing, or you get excited about things, you get sort of a burst of dopamine, and it makes you feel good, and it helps with memory as well. So it's helping brains communicate, and it's really important in feeling good about things as well too. And the basal ganglia, sorry, I touched my thing here. Okay, there we go. So it processes that information. And the good thing about the whole basal ganglia pathways in your brain is that there's not just one pathway, there's 3 main pathways. And the one that's most affected in Parkinson's is our habitual everyday movements. So being able to roll over in bed, get up, walk across the room, go get something, pick it up and come back. All of those kind of activities of daily living and habitual daily things. And usually walking is a very automatic process. We don't have to think about that. There's another circuit that deals with your thinking processes, your executive function, and your ability to pay attention, or to pay attention to more than one thing at a time. So if you think about things like going across the street. When you step off the curb, you have to be able to pay attention to the oncoming traffic. You might be watching the signal light. You're looking at the road. You're making sure everything's safe. Maybe you're walking, you know, holding somebody's hand, or you're carrying a bag. So that's a lot of different things for your brain to be automatically or easily taking in, processing, and reacting to. So that's where that executive function and attention comes in. And then the limbic circuits, which are kind of emotional circuits, that's that motivation and reward. So those are really important things to think about. How do we treat freezing? And I'm a physical therapist, so I would put therapy up there at the very, very top of the list. But medications are very important, and having your medications optimized so that you have a good amount of a dopamine replacement or medication that helps you move and that it works over your whole day and helps you move. So optimizing your medications is really the job of you and your physician, your neurologist or movement disorder neurologist, and getting that good feedback about how those medications are working. That's really, really important. Physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech therapists can all play a role in helping you with your freezing of gait. External cueing devices. So that's what we're going to talk about. How does an external cueing device, a device like the NexStride, how does that work? And then what are internal cueing devices or internal cueing strategies? And some people do better. They've shown with some cognitive training, and there is some research that deep brain stimulation is effective. And if medications are very specific to each person, but typically the carbidopa levodopa or dopamine replacement medication is still is the gold standards, and everything else are more just helping with you and your dopamine levels. And you can't make more dopamine once those cells die. So as that's why as the disease progresses and you have less and less dopamine over time, you usually need more medications or more help with things over time. That's the progressive nature of Parkinson's disease. So I'm going to talk a little bit about therapy, because I'm a therapist, and how we would use a device like the NexStride, how that would fit into therapy. So in therapy, my number one thing I want to do is I want to help people get better. I want them to restore their function. So I want to treat some of those underlying problems and get people better. And a lot of that has to do with improving posture, improving the ability to move, getting that. Parkinson's has an amplitude dysregulation problem where you have slowness of movement or small movements, and it's called bradykinesia. You've probably seen your doctors ask you to move, do this kind of type of stuff. They're looking at how fast your movements are, and that, that dysregulation is where you go to move fast, your movements get really small, and when you try to move big, your movements get really slow. So it's an amplitude dysregulation problem, and therapy can help with that. We can add tools and try different things to offset the problem and teach compensatory strategies. So talking about, with somebody having trouble walking through a doorway, there's ways we can change where their visual focus is. I can teach a strategy like looking up and counting or predicting my steps so that I, as Sidney said, change that intention. So those are things that, I can work with people with Parkinson's to teach them. And the last thing I can kind of do is change things about their living environment, modify, maybe we have to add in some assistive devices. Maybe we need some more help from our care partners to remember and what to do next. So in a little more detail, talking about those problems, posture, slowness, or that movement dysregulation, stiffness, dual task set switching. In the old days, so long ago, I'd say before the last 10 years, people would come to therapy only when they were really falling, and we would try to keep everything simple. And we'd say, well, if you have trouble walking and carrying something or walking and talking, then just don't do those things. Now we know that we can teach people to get better at dual tasks or set switching, paying attention to more things at one time. We can teach them to be more intentional or pay attention to action. So that's that word intention again, being changing that intent from your brain, focusing your attention on the right things. There's a lot of Parkinson's that, we can get people moving with better movement patterns. Usually your strength is pretty good, but you just don't get the movement patterns in the right sequence. So it gets hard to get up and down out of a chair, and all of those things are things therapy can help with. Managing that anxiety and stress in your life and getting enough sleep, all of those things are very, very important, as is staying active. We know that exercise will help your brain work better. It helps nourish your brain with lots of neurotrophic factors. It helps reduce inflammation. It helps your brain be healthier. It helps your dopamine system work better. So staying active is really important. So if you have freezing, we'll talk a little bit about the issues of freezing. If you have freezing and you don't know when it's going to happen, or it might happen in a crowded place, or it might happen, going through a doorway. So you're trying to go into a restaurant and you know that you might freeze. What's going to happen is you're not really going to want to get out and go and do things. A freeze can last, typically it only lasts for a couple of seconds, but it could last, up to 10 seconds. And some people even, suffer with that freeze, that inability to move for up to 30 seconds at a time. The other thing to think about is it happens a lot with turning. It doesn't happen as much with walking straight, but initiating movement and changes of surfaces. So if you're walking in a public place and the surface is changing, then that can create, cause some freezing episodes, but it happens a lot with turns. And those turns are also a time when people fall. And some of the research I've read says we turn in our homes about 400 times a day, and we may turn up to 1,000 times a day. So if you imagine that every time you turn, you're going to have an incidence of freezing or might freeze, then you're going to be really fearful of getting up and moving and doing anything. And the other part of that is that you're going to be really exhausted if you are struggling every time you turn. So those are some of the things we're going to work on, and therapy does help with that. I lost my cursor here. Okay, good. Compensation. So I do a lot of asking people to move furniture, removing throw rugs. Sometimes we'll add a piece of tape in a doorway or a target up on the wall to get people to have a strategy to get through their pathways. And I'm fortunate, I get to work in people's homes, so I get to help them figure out how to make things work better. The other thing that we can do is add some tools. So we can use a cueing device, visual, auditory, and there is some research on some somatosensory, right? Adding some vibration or different things at the feet. And we're going to talk a lot about adding some external cueing. Internal cueing devices or strategy. Those are things that if you start to feel a freeze coming on, then there's some strategies we can work on, just things like the 5 S's, where you stop, you stand up tall, you sigh or take a deep breath, you shift your weight a little bit because you can't move if you can't shift your weight, and then you step. That's an internal strategy that you would have to remember and cue yourself internally. There's other strategies like knowing that whenever I stop, I'm not going to stop with my feet together. I'm going to stop with one foot, kind of as one foot in front of the other. You're less likely to freeze if you have a staggered stance. You're more likely to freeze if your feet are together, and especially if they're really close together. So working on a lot of that, just wide-based weight shifting strategies. But there are some things you can work on to remember. But remember, it's hard to dual task. It's hard to remember and think and keep moving with some of those habitual behaviors. So some of those problems that cue can help with, and when you tend to have Parkinson's, and especially if you're a freezer, you have a reduced step length, so your steps are shorter. And both visual and auditory cueing has great efficacy. It helps with both of those. Your walking speed tends to get slower. People with Parkinson's, there was a good study that they did, and people with Parkinson's within the first year of diagnosis were still walking almost the same amount of steps, a little bit less, but they were walking a lot. There was a significant decrease in their vigorous steps, or how being able to walk and walk quickly or walk fast. There's that physical activity, which we know is super important to keep your physical activity up. So using a metronome, a beeping cue can help you walk more frequently or get more steps in. Freezing, laser lights, and auditory are both shown in the research to be helpful, and really excellent that it helps reduce fall frequency using that laser light. Turning, right? I said we turn at least, probably a minimum of 400 times a day, if not 1,000 times a day or more often. And auditory really helps with turning. And the research shows that an auditory cue, that rhythmical pacing auditory cue, can help with dual tasking. So lots of good research. And Sidney can talk a little bit more about some of that later. Adding assistive devices, teaching care partners, increasing, having somebody there helping you. And sometimes in the very late stages, we just say, if you need to get out, you need to stay social, you need to feel comfortable being out in public. So sometimes it's okay to go ahead and take a wheelchair and not worry about that. But in a perfect world, we don't want to have to get to that point. We want to keep you walking and safe and out on your feet. One of the things to think about, and one of the studies that they did with people with Parkinson's, the number one symptom that bothered them the most was the stigma of having Parkinson's. And I think freezing of gait feeds into that a lot. If you're worried about how being out in public and you might have a freeze if there's a crowd, or you have to go through a doorway to enter a room or to get into your church or into a restaurant, then that's a really challenging thing for you. So how does the NexStride help? So it does provide those external sensory cues, as Sidney said, the metronome and the green laser line. And I thought it was really fun because Jack was very insistent that the line be green, because he felt his brain, if he saw a red line, it would mean stop. But if he saw a green line, to him that meant go. And as it turns out, there's research that shows that a green laser line is more effective than any other color with freezing of gaits. So Jack was a very brilliant man. We talk about a little bit about preventing freezing versus how do you get out of a freeze or recovering from a freeze. And using that NexStride, they've got some good data that shows a 43% reduction in that frequency of freezing episodes and a 69% reduction in duration of freezing episodes. So sometimes that freeze is going to happen no matter what you're doing. But being able to quickly and efficiently get moving again with very minimal attention to the fact that you've gotten stuck is really, really important. So that confidence is really, really important. And having that confidence to get out and go is really important. I'm a big fan of a physician, a neuropath out of Washington, Bastyr University, and she's doing a lot of research about lifestyle choices. And one of the factors that she's finding that has the people that are having poor outcomes, that are getting worse much quickly compared to people that are staying active and healthier longer over the course of their Parkinson's disease, the number one question they answered yes to was, I am lonely. So people that answer I am lonely to that question have a worse outcome of their quality of life. So there's a lot to be said for social interactions, for getting out, being active, doing the things that you love. And so having the confidence to get out to do those things is really, really important. So some of the other research out there shows that in that little chart that both visual and auditory cueing is going to help with all of those different things. And reducing the number of falls is really important. So this slide just give you a little idea. If you wanted to look at the research, there's a lot to back up the device that we're talking about here. And I get to turn it back over to Sidney.
All right, thank you, Maria. So let me go back one slide. Thank you. So yeah, I think that I would just want to underscore what Maria was just saying in that last slide. So this this table is actually pulled from a white paper that we just published with one of the leading researchers in Parkinson's space, Becky Farley. She's also the Chief Scientific Officer and the founder of PWR, Parkinson's Wellness and Recovery. And so I will share all, or I think Anissa will send out these slides so that you guys will have access to all of this information and you can dive deeper into the research yourself as well. Or again, if you have any questions, make sure to ask us in the chat so that we can answer them after the presentation. So again, all we did was take the most effective visual and auditory cues that have been shown to be effective in research, and we put them into a device that we thought is the easiest for people to use, to be able to attach onto their canes and walkers, and to be able to help give them confidence to overcome freezing of gait. Here's another video. So I have two other videos I wanted to show you. I showed you the videos of Jack earlier, who's the first person that I ever made this device for. But here's actually a video of a person trying one of our first prototypes, and he's actually experiencing a freezing episode in this video. He's unable to move his legs, and then he quickly activates the green laser line from the NexStride, and it allows him to take those first steps. So you can kind of see it in action. And I'm not sure if you can tell, but his hand, there's a little green button at the top. So all he does is he moves his thumb and he activates that green button at the top, which activates the laser. So it's super easy to activate and to control, which I think is really important for a device that people are going to be using for freezing. So this video, we're not using the green laser, we're actually using the metronome. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear it, but this is one of our customers who lives down in LA, and he loves to go on hikes. He's super active. He's not usually using a cane or a walker, so he's kind of earlier stage in Parkinson's. But he does use walking poles when he goes out on hikes. And what he was noticing is when he was going up hills or when he was fishing and he was going through small streams of water, that's when he would freeze up the most. And so he got the NexStride so that he could take it out on hikes and so that he could continue to do that exercise that he loves without the fear of freezing. So here's a video that he sent us of him walking up one of his favorite hikes. So walking poles are a great solution for people that aren't using a cane or a walker, but you might want some added stability when you're going out on walks, when you're going out on hikes, like what we showed you. So he actually has the metronome on and he's stepping to the beat of the metronome as he's hiking. So in addition to those videos, I wanted to share some other feedback that we've gotten from surveys that we sent out to everybody who's using the NexStride. So the first thing I want to point out is these quotes that we have. So these are completely uninitiated from us. The first time that one of our customers got the NexStride, he emailed us that night saying that he was able to walk into and out of dinner with his wife for the first time in a year. And he was so excited about that. And this is really the reason we get this device out to people. The reason we do what we do is for emails like that, you know, showing that we can have an impact on people, we can get them walking. And then another quote saying the NexStride really gives them a sense of freedom, makes a difference for them. In addition to that, 100% of the customers that we surveyed reported increased confidence while walking. So as Maria said, one of the reasons that people end up not exercising as much, not getting out as much, is because of that fear of freezing takes away your confidence to be able to get up and go, you know, on a walk, go walk to the beach, go to dinner, and walk into that restaurant instead of being in a wheelchair. Can be really important. So 100% reported increased confidence while walking. 93% reported increased mobility and decreased fear of falling. And 64% of people reported they were just increasing the amount that they were walking. Excuse me, sorry, I have something stuck in my throat.
So while Sidney's getting her throat cleared, I'll point out the fact that right now there's only research in animal models that says that exercise is neuroprotective, that actually it changes the course of the disease, it changes the amount of that bad alpha-synuclein misfolded protein that happens and builds up. So in people, there's a lot of indirect evidence. There's tons and tons of indirect evidence that more activity, more exercise, at least, the kind of minimum amount is 3 times a day for 30 minutes. And the more vigorous and active it is, the better the outcome, the better people's quality of life is. So there's lots of indirect evidence that exercise and activity is so important from that perspective. So to be able to have 64% of those people report an increased amount of walking, the benefits are astronomical for people.
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite pieces of data right there, is just that we're getting people up and walking more, because that is so, so important. Thank you, Maria. So one of the things that we want to look at, so we have the research, we know that visual and auditory cues work, but what's the best way to put this together and give it to somebody? So this is what we were thinking about when we were developing this product. And what's really different about our device, which is what I think makes it a great solution, is the versatility of it, the fact that it can attach onto any cane, walker, walking pole. You actually just attach it with this rubber band that we created, that we developed ourselves. So you can attach it onto anything that is round, basically. And we also have 2 sizes of the bands. So it'll work for kind of the larger walkers, like the Drive Nitro walker. We have a larger band for that one. One of the reasons that that's important is that the mobility assistive device that you use is usually very specific to your needs. Whether you need added stability of a weighted walker, or you want to use walking poles to improve your posture, there's very specific walking poles or assistive devices that are going to work for each person. So we want to be able to just add these cues onto whatever it is that you're already using, instead of forcing you to use our cane or use our walker. The other reason that's really important is that mobility symptoms will fluctuate during Parkinson's. Maybe you'll have a fall and you'll go into a walker, and then after going to physical therapy, your mobility increases, and you go back into using a cane. We want you to be able to consistently use the NexStride throughout those mobility fluctuations. So you can take it off, put it back on. We also have people that use a walker inside the house, and when they go outside, they use a cane, or vice versa. So you can attach and detach the NexStride super easily and switch it between those mobility devices. The second point is the effective variability. So by using both the visual and the auditory cues, we're allowing people to more effectively overcome freezing of gait. Research shows that the combination of those cues together is more effective than either of those cues alone. And the last point is having on-demand cues. So not only does that increase the ease of use, so as I showed you before, all you have to do is move your thumb to activate either of those cues or to turn them off, but it also allows you to have complete control over when those cues are on or off, which allows you kind of take away, if you don't want to be bringing attention to yourself, you can have complete control over when those cues are on or off.
And it is best to be able to vary those cues, because if you use that cue continuously, it can become less effective or extinct over time. So being able to turn it on and off and only use it intermittently is a really excellent feature.
Right. So we talked about the reducing the duration of freezing versus reducing the frequency of freezing. So being able to have complete control over when the cues are on or off, you can use them either as a continuous cue or as an on-demand cue. And we do have a lot of variability here, so you can customize exactly where the laser line is. You can move it forward or backwards. And then you can also change the beat of the metronome to match your walking speed, to be a little bit above your walking speed. We have another video that we're going to put up on our YouTube that is, again, John, the man who I just showed you a video of when he was hiking, he sent in another video, and it shows him kind of switching. When he's going uphill, he turns down the metronome to be a little bit slower. When he's going downhill, he turns it up to go a little bit faster. So you can kind of see how that device can be customized. Thanks, Maria.
So yeah, and as I said, some people experience freezing when they're very anxious. So I would actually want them to walk slower and more rhythmically. So at that pace, being able to vary that depending what this, what's the trigger for that freezing. I might slow somebody way down to take those slower, bigger steps versus having that, like watching John, hiking up that hill, his beat's going to be a lot faster. So that's a great option.
So I did want to share, if this is a device that you're interested in, or that somebody that might be able to benefit from using it, you can purchase it on our website, so www.getnexstride.com. And I did make a special coupon code for the people that are watching this video for $100 off. That coupon code is just PMD100. And again, I really want to make sure that this is no risk for anybody. We want you to be able to try it, see if it works for you, see if it's a good fit for you. So we do offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. We'll pay for shipping both ways. If you want to purchase it, try it out, see if it's a good fit for you. You can have it there for 30 days before sending it back. We do have payment plans, so you don't need to pay all at once. You can pay in 4 interest-free payments, or you can pay over 12 months at less price per month. In addition to that, if finances are a barrier, I want to make sure that everybody knows that we actually partner with the Parkinson's Wellness Fund, who will provide a grant to help cover the cost. So they'll cover 75 to 100% of the cost for anybody who needs financial assistance. So again, I really, really want to underscore that financing should not be a barrier to getting the device right now. If you think that there's anybody that can benefit from the device, if you can benefit from the device, please, please, please reach out to me and we'll figure out a way to get you the NexStride. And then one last slide here, and then we'll turn it over to questions. I just want to make sure that you all have access to more resources. So the white paper that we talked about in this presentation, again, these will all get sent out. The white paper, we have a link to the white paper in the presentation that we discussed. We have a Parkinson's disease ebook that just has a really high level understanding Parkinson's. And then we have a blog post that we posted with the Parkinson's Movement Disorder Alliance, the PMD Alliance, that talks about sensory cueing and the NexStride. And then another blog post that talks specifically about visual and auditory cueing on the Davis-Finney Foundation. So I wanted to make sure to include those links for you if you had any questions or need any other resources. All right, let's open it up to questions. Maria, is there anything else that you wanted to add here?
No, I'm seeing a lot of really interesting questions, so that will be good to answer some of those questions. No, there was something I thought in my head, but I've been looking at some of the questions, so. And how do we go about that, Anissa?
Some of them are related to freezing a gait specifically, and some of them are related to the device. So I will kind of go through those. If you want to stop sharing screen, that way we can see everybody just loves to see each other's faces. So this was really interesting. So there was some questions specific to freezing and falls. So one person asked, and Maria, this is probably going to be directed to you. Yep. If you can speak to falls more in terms of the percentage of race of what falls more frequently, forward falls or backward falls. And then there was another question about backwards falls that I was looking for here. But can you give us an update on that?
Sure. So falls, I think a lot of falls with freezers happen with turning. And so in Parkinson's, your feet are on the ground and your brain is saying, I'm going to turn this way. And so you start turning and your feet don't go first. And that's that automatic habitual pathways, that message isn't getting down to those feet. So you start to turn and your weight is on the leg, and then you can't pick it up in your other foot. You end up tripping and falling. So that turns, a lot of falls are turns. Now, falling forward is not as common. Backwards fallings in Parkinson's has to do a lot with that sequencing and timing and coordination, and that you start to push and you don't get your weight forward over your feet. And so that strength pushes you back instead of pushing you up. And sometimes it's because you don't ever get that full upright posture. So if you're falling backwards, a lot of that is changing your movement patterns and sequencing and timing, maybe where your hands are, how far, getting that forward lean and leaning forward when you sit down so you don't just plop down. So that's a lot of what therapy can help you with there. If you are falling backwards when you're walking and having maybe that laser light in a walker ahead of you that keeps your weight shifted forward would help you there. That laser light, and Sidney talked about it a little bit, you can, either step on it or step over it. You can adjust how far out ahead it is, and so that you can take that bigger step depending on your step length. And it also can work as more just that idea of knowing that that light is there and you're going to step over it. Because a lot of that forward flex posture and looking down at the floor kind of creates some of that freezing, because your feet can't move if they're close together and your weight's on your toes. You can't really unweight that leg. You can't move if you can't shift your weight off that leg. So you have to shift that weight off your leg in order to move it forward. So the ability to move that laser line out farther, visualize or imagine, or kind of that imagery stuff can help a lot with that. But if you're truly in a freeze and you're stuck and you need to look down and say, tell your brain that goal of stepping on or over that line, that can get you out of that freeze. Maybe the rest of the time you just know that that laser light is there, and that gives you the confidence and reduces that anxiety and helps you just keep moving. So some of those falls are related to that flex posture. Some of it's related to that narrow base and the inability to unweight that leg and take that step. So that's a big problem with those. Forwards and backwards most of the time. The only time I think people really fall forwards, people with Parkinson's can have kind of, they call it hastening, where your upper body gets out so far out ahead and your feet are going really small and really fast. Remember, small movements are fast and big movements are slow in Parkinson's. So you get going and your feet are going so fast, you're just headlong, you go headlong into a wall or headlong into a fall forwards. And that hastening is kind of a precursor to freezing. So I don't see as many. I do see falls backwards, and that is kind of that, pushing before you get forward. It's that incoordination part of Parkinson's disease there. That kind of answer, that's a lot of words about falls and turning, but a lot of that is related to the symptoms of Parkinson's.
Well, and it's a little more involved than just one answer too. So I think you gave a really great overview of that. So there were some questions specific to the device. So there was a question in terms of, what about those who are colorblind and not being able to see it? And can you change the brightness of the green line?
So good question. So if you're colorblind, you'll be able to see a line still, you just won't see that it's green. It'll just look like a white line. So it should still work for people that are colorblind. The second question, can you change the brightness? Unfortunately, right now you can't change the brightness. We have it just at one setting, which seems to work for most people. It is going to be a little bit hard to see in direct sunlight. And there's not really much we can do about that. We have the strongest laser that we can, that still falls under the safety class for the FDA. We want to make sure that it's safe for people to use. But something that I'll tell people if they have questions about using it outside, any type of shade will help make sure you can see that line. It's only when it's in direct sunlight. So what I'll do if I'm out with somebody using the NexStride is I can even just like put my arm over where the laser is, and that'll allow you to see the line. So like an umbrella, any type of shade really helps.
There was an earlier question that was related to the laser that comes with the U-Step walker. And they wanted to know, how is it different than this device? So that device, as I understand it, doesn't have the metronome.
So the U-Step walker, they actually do have the metronome and the laser, but it's integrated into the walker. It's only fits onto their walker. So we're creating, it is the same idea, and that U-Step walker works great for a specific population of people with Parkinson's, but what we're creating is something that can attach onto any cane, walker, walking pole. So that variability, that customizability.
That's wonderful.
And one of the things looking forward, I mean, having that device be, I think it was a question about the metronome, and the metronome right now is just from the device, but being able to have a Bluetooth or an earpiece so that you could have that directly into your ear and easier to hear in crowded situations is, something that Sidney is looking at developing, or having a device like that, because a lot of people don't use an assisted device and still have freezing. And so having a device that maybe mounts onto a belt or onto your hand so that you have that easy way to keep yourself from freezing or get out of a freeze if you're not using an assisted device. Because an assisted device, especially a cane, is a dual task. You have to think, you have to sequence that and time that. And so some people have a harder time using a cane or sequencing the hiking poles, and they're not ready for and don't need a walker, which requires less cognitive attention to use a walker, but increases that flexed posture. So, that's some of those feedback things that Sidney's gathering and looking at. How can we make this device better and serve a bigger population? And the U-Step is out there, and some people need that walker, and they need that, really nice big walker, but other people don't. And there's, there's like some laser light things, because visual and auditory cues are known to be effective. There are a lot of other devices out there as well too that are trying to do the same thing.
I wanted to add one other thing that's different about what's offered with the U-Step is that we actually offer the ability to completely control how fast that metronome is and the volume. So with the U-Step, you have a set number of beats that you can try, but with the NexStride, it's continuous. So you can set it to exactly your walking speed. So I think that customizability is important to note as well. I did see some questions on the insurance. So we have applied for Medicare coverage. We don't have coverage yet. We're working with Sutter Health to get the data that we need. The problem is that with Medicare, so we're applying for it for an at-home use product, and all of the research that has been published has been recorded in the clinic. So we need to redo all of that research at home. So that's what we're doing to be able to get Medicare coverage, but we're working on it. We know it's important. It is on our top priority.
So there was a question in regards to the success of using NexStride with those who have dementia.
I haven't done any research in dementia. I have seen some studies be published in the use of the visual and auditory cues in dementia in the general elderly population with mobility. And there has been some preliminary results that show success, but I haven't done research myself in dementia for the NexStride.
So I can comment a little bit on that. Just thinking along as the disease progresses and you have less and less dopamine in your system and less ability to tap into to get those habitual movements back, you have to rely more on cueing strategies in those external cueing strategies. So as it makes sense, there maybe isn't the research, and that's probably research we need to do, that shows that adding, I know from a therapist perspective, if I add a cue, if I put a, tape out on the, tell somebody to step over that, or just have that there, I don't have to give them, they don't have to process as much of the verbal or the auditory or safety things. They can just follow that. It's more, it drives, the more external cueing you use, you need to use more of those, as it's harder and harder to process that, those verbal commands or those ideas or thoughts. So it definitely fits with how we work with people that have more and more cognitive problems, because it drives that external cue, drives the goal-directed, target-based part of the brain that works, is still working, still less damaged than the automatic stuff. So
there was a question about the device weight and what kind of battery is used.
Great question. So the weight, it's about 6 ounces total, so super light. And then the battery is rechargeable. So it's a rechargeable battery. All you do to charge it, so here's the device attached onto a cane. Let me see if I can get this. All you do to charge it is you're going to unplug the hand controller, and then you plug this into just USB wall outlet. So let's see, I can show you. something like this, right? You'll just plug that in and plug it into the wall. And the battery lasts 6 to 8 hours when both the visual and the auditory cues are on consistently. So usually people don't have the cues on all day long. So on average, people are charging it about once a week, sometimes every few days, depending on how often you're using it, how often you have it on.
And we are coming to the end of our time, but I know people are wanting to know about a brochure and something they might even take to their physician to discuss it. Now, you don't really need an order from a physician in order to obtain this. But do you have literature other than what will be available in the slides that people can reach out to you and get?
Yeah, absolutely. If people have any questions, I'll have them reach out to me. You can also chat us on our website. Me and my co-founder get those chats, so we will be the ones responding to you. Give us a call. All of that information's on our website. Any questions that you have, feel free to reach out to me. The one thing I wanted to add, I answered your question about Medicare, but I want to make sure that people know that we can get the device covered for anybody who needs financial assistance right now, even before it's covered by Medicare, through the grant that we have with the Parkinson's Wellness Fund. So anybody should be able to get the device right now.
That's awesome.
And
did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, if you're working with a physical therapist and you would like to try the device, your physical therapist can reach out to Sidney and they can send them a device to try in the clinic with you. So that's another option and good way to go.
Right. We have demos out with over 40 clinics across the US, including the Mayo Clinic, Kaiser, Muhammad Ali Center, Parkinson's Foundation in Western Pennsylvania.
Well, that's fantastic. So this has been really an amazing and interesting talk today. Your device is fantastic. I want to thank you so much for sharing all of this knowledge and showing us a little bit about freezing a gait as well. So I want to thank you both so much for joining us. If all of our watchers today would want to just give us a wave of gratitude to our presenters today, we want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us today. It will be up on our YouTube channel soon, and you can request the slides. So thank you for joining us. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.